Hey everybody, it's Mike Schumann of the Daily Hoosier here for another episode of the East 17th Street podcast. I am joined once again by Seth for the Daily Hoosier, and we are here to talk about yet another high-profile matchup for IU football. Seth, I feel like we're a little bit spoiled here. We keep getting these massive matchups. Fourth college game day in the last 12 games, I believe. We circled this one at the start of the season as a marquee matchup, and it is held to form Indiana number 7 at number 2/3 Oregon. That's 2 in the coaches poll, number 3 in the AP. College game day on site in Eugene Saturday morning. Oregon is a 7.5 point favorite, and the game kicks off at 3:30 p.m. on CBS. Seth, give me your initial read on this game. Big picture. What are your impressions of the Ducks and Hoosier so far?
Well, big picture. Frankly, Oregon had a great win at Penn State a couple weeks ago, but suddenly that win doesn't look the same as it did coming out of that game after Penn State went and laid an egg and lost to UCLA, and UCLA is really, really bad. So that was, that's got a lot of big picture conversations beginning to stir down over at State College. So now it's like, it's weird to think that about saying this, but Indiana is now the best team that Oregon will have played so far this season. So I guess I don't know fully what to make of Oregon. But, there's no doubt that this is the best team Indiana has seen thus far this season. I think these are two teams that don't really have many weaknesses all around. I think these are two really overall strong teams, well-built, both two good offensive lines, strong defenses, two good quarterbacks, good coaching. This is one of those games where, little margins could matter.
Yeah, I was talking to Matt Dennison on his radio show this morning, and we got on the topic of Penn State, and I said, that game in November, we all thought it was going to be massive, and now it could be anything from they could have a new coach by then to they could beat Ohio State a couple weeks before and play themselves right back into the CFP conversation. It's like so hard to know exactly what is going on with Penn State right now. I don't want to get too off track on that point because that's still a ways off, and like I said, really hard to predict. But let me give you and our listeners a few more numbers for Oregon. SP Plus likes Oregon 28-22 with a 65% chance to win. ESPN's FBI gives Oregon a 69.5% chance to win. So really everything is pointing to Oregon, kind of as you would expect. And part of the reason why they've won 23 straight regular season games, 18 straight games at home. This is an outfit that rarely loses. I think head coach Dan Lanning has only lost one home game in his early tenure at Oregon. So this is just not a place where Oregon typically loses.
Yeah. And Indiana, a big talking point going into the Iowa game a couple weeks ago for Indiana was, first road game of the season. There were obviously the well-documented issues that IU had with crowd noise last season at Ohio State. How would they look? And Indiana handled, obviously they won the game. They, Kinnick is a tough place to go in and win. And while it wasn't entirely, totally 100% smooth, a win's a win, and they got the job done. But it's the kind of thing where you're going to have to keep proving it and keep showing it every week that it's still not an issue. And, Kinnick is a tough place to win, but so is Autzen. And You're right that this is, going to be a juiced-up atmosphere, college game day, one of the games of the year in college football. So, it's going to be just as big of a challenge in that respect.
One of the early wild cards I see in this game, if it holds up, is the weather forecast, which is calling for temperatures in the high 50s and rain, which I think could have a couple effects. It could change the way the game is played on both sides, but in my opinion, probably would mute the crowd a little bit. I don't know. I'm sure Oregonians are more accustomed to rain than we are at this time of year, but that typically takes the juice out of a crowd a little bit.
Yeah. The tech issues that we had before the show seem to be resurfacing, so I missed quite a bit of that. But
Okay. Did you get the overarching point about playing
I
in the
heard you.
rain?
I heard you talk about the weather forecast, and then a lot of nothing.
Okay. The question or comment is, playing in the rain could affect the way the teams play, but it could also just affect the crowd noise and the energy that's in the stadium if it's kind of a damp, miserable day.
Yeah, that's kind of fair to say. But also, I mean, the fans that are going to be in there are going to be in it for the long haul. And the fans that stay out there, I mean, it's the kind of thing where if you're out there already, you may as well just go crazy.
Right.
And rain crowds can kind of maybe it won't be a full packed to the brim. Maybe some of the fringe fans may not stay around for the whole game, if depending on how things are going and how wet it really is. But I mean, that's the sort of thing that can even make it even livelier because it's just kind of an extra element, going on. I don't know. It's tough to say how it would impact the crowd or the crowd noise, I guess. And I guess I don't know exactly who would gain an advantage in that sort of environment. Indiana, I don't think Indiana's played in any real rain yet. There was a little bit of rain in the second half of the Illinois game, but that feels like a bit of an outlier given that it started raining when they had already scored like 40 points in the game.
Right. The forecast kind of looks somewhat similar to the Maryland game last year, where it could be like, probably not like a monsoon or anything, but just like an element that you're going to have to deal with the whole game. And I think the IU crowd was pretty good that game. So we'll see if that forecast holds up, first of all, and second of all, if it impacts the game in any way on or off the field. I've got a trivia question for you and our listeners here, because I was looking at Oregon's schedule to date, and you look at it and you see, oh my goodness, they just absolutely annihilated Oklahoma State. They annihilated Oregon State, two teams that I would say, traditionally are respectable college football programs. But the trivia question is, how many FBS wins do you think Oklahoma State and Oregon State have combined this year?
I'm going to take a big swing and say 0.
That would be correct. They have one win between them, and that was Oklahoma State winning against an FCS team. So while those scores are quite impressive, you have to consider that those are not the Oklahoma States of the Barry Sanders or pick your era, and it's certainly not the Oregon State of the Pac-10 era. So, obviously going to Penn State and winning is about as impressive as it gets, because that game had everything going for it. Whiteout, night game, Penn State, top 5. But as we said, in retrospect, what does it really mean? I don't know. It was a 17-all game at the end of regulation. So that's something I wanted to mention here as we kind of segue into Dante Moore and his impressive start to the season. But I wanted to highlight his stats going into the overtime in that game. He had thrown for 206 yards and a touchdown. And something, and as I mentioned, led the team to 17 points in regulation. Again, not taking anything away from doing that at Penn State in that sort of environment. I think it's impressive, but I think, he had 2 more touchdowns in overtime, where stats just get weird in games like that. And something else I thought was interesting, and this is from PFF, his average depth of target on his throws. He completed 29 passes, but his average depth of target was only 5.9. So it was a little bit of a dink and dunk. And if you look at his profile throughout the start of the season, it doesn't look like they're kind of letting him air it out. And, maybe obviously it's been effective, but I feel like it does at least highlight a potential way Indiana can go about attacking Oregon's offense.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think, and frankly, a key to that, I mean, talking about Indiana a little bit is, Kurt Signetti said D'Angelo Ponce he expects to play,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean that's a question of what really was he dealing with and how healthy is he? I mean that's
Right.
going to be a huge key to that point.
Yeah, but I think for him to like not even hesitate and say, "Yeah, he's playing, he's fine." I feel like, and I watched. I don't know. You were obviously in Iowa. I was watching on television, and they had several close up shots of him warming up, and he looked, for as well as you can tell in that context, he looked like he was pretty healthy. Like I think he was legitimately not that far away 2 weeks ago. So I suspect Pons is totally fine, but that's a pure guess based on what I've seen and heard.
Yeah, I mean I hate playing doctor with some of that stuff, but I mean I did watch him warm up, and I watched him warm up, and he just wasn't taking part in most of the things that involve physical contact a couple weeks
Right.
ago. So it was it's hard to gauge exactly where he was. I mean, obviously he dressed and gave it a go in some capacity, but I mean, he didn't really do anything that involved physical contact out there. So I can't say that he was close to playing given that.
Right. I can just imagine a scenario where if it is kind of a rainy day and, Moore to this point hasn't been making, big downfield throws, I can see a scenario where Indiana's going to like have a ton of pressure up at the line of scrimmage, press man coverage, and just say, hey, if you're going to beat us, you're going to make big, deep throws in the rain. I mean, that logically that's what it looks like right now, but obviously that's a long way to go between now and Saturday, and we'll see if that forecast holds up. But because I feel like, going back to our preseason conversation, like this isn't the Dante Moore we thought we'd see. Like Heisman conversation, like we were like, Oregon might take a step back because this guy hasn't proven much. So I think Indiana probably needs to make him prove it in a situation like I'm describing.
Absolutely, and I think part of that also part of what's helped him also is that Oregon's offensive line has been so good in the pass blocking. I mean, PFF grades Oregon #1 in the country in pass blocking, and so that's going to be a big challenge for Indiana in going up against this offense for Oregon. Is are you going to be able to get enough pressure? You may not need to get sacks, but are you going to make Dante Moore feel enough heat and kind of speed up that internal clock enough to where you're able to make an impact on the game up front and not just let him pick you apart in the secondary?
Yeah, he's only been sacked once all season. Um, and the risk of playing the style that I've suggested here with having everything at the line of scrimmage and man coverage is that he's a really good runner and he could find running lanes and the field could be wide open if he kind of breaks that initial contain. So he's a dangerous guy. I don't want to downplay him, but I do think this is probably going to be because of the film that he's got out there against Penn State and the playing style that they've used so far. I think, and with 2 weeks to prepare, I think Indiana's going to be ready for him.
Yeah, I think both teams have. That's a big element for this game. Is both teams had a bye coming into this, so both staffs have had a while to prepare. Both staffs had a while to prepare for this and a while to really study up on each other. And obviously there's the rest element, but both teams have had a long time to stare at each other ahead of this game.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I was looking back, Indiana last year, their 2 buys came ahead of the Nebraska game and the Ohio State game. Pretty mixed results in those 2 games in terms of how they performed after coming out of a bye. Obviously, Nebraska, they won 56-7. Probably their best performance of the season, but there's a few to pick from there. Ohio State, I mean, yeah, I don't even want to get into that game. They played well in the first half, is all I'm going to say. So it's not as if they just got shell shocked there or anything coming out of that bye week. So, but it is kind of hard to say what a bye week meant for the staff. Nebraska and Ohio State, obviously 2 wildly different teams last year as well.
Yeah, and I mean, bye weeks can also often be spent, assessing some things internally and cleaning up some other things. And it's not just 2 straight weeks of game planning. And certainly, but both between coaching and, the players, there's plenty that Indiana could be looking at, internally during the bye week to shore things up. I mean, the short yardage offensive situations kind of, were a problem again against Iowa, with part of it being play calling, part of it being execution. And there's, just things like that you can kind of take the bye week to kind of assess internally, try to work on, irrespective of the opponent, without, just spending 2 straight weeks of game planning too. So that's also part of it. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely much closer to that Ohio State game, in terms of going into it and the caliber of opponent that Indiana is getting out of a bye than what they had in that Nebraska game.
And listening to Dan Lanning, he's had a couple press conferences since they beat Penn State. He said they've been mostly doing as you suggested, focusing on themselves, especially last week. He's just looking at his coaching resume here. He's 40-6 as a head coach, now in his 4th season, 26-3 in conference play. Interestingly enough, just to add another layer of what the challenge is for Indiana, he's never lost a Big Ten game. Technically, anyway, he lost to Ohio State in the CFP last year, which doesn't count as a conference game, although it is a loss to a conference opponent. So just one more element of a very impressive resume. I kind of got a chuckle from Cignetti yesterday. We're recording on Tuesday, if I didn't already say that, but Cignetti yesterday was lavishing the praise on Lanning, which I think he's worthy of, but it felt like a little bit of a Saban type moment where Cignetti was the one kind of sprinkling the rat poison out there if he could, both on Lanning and on Dante Moore. I'm sure Lanning got a laugh at it as well, because Lanning's a former Saban guy, at least for a year, and he came up through Georgia. And I feel like Lanning is kind of goes against a trend. Like he came to Oregon from being a coordinator at Georgia, and I feel like the trend is more like, at a marquee program like Oregon, you want to hire a proven head coach. I don't know if you have any reaction to that. I was just thinking about that earlier. Like, I don't feel like you see as much of people taking gambles on coordinators because they feel like more of a crapshoot. Whereas, you hire a guy like Cignetti who's has a more proven track record as a head coach. It seems to pan out a little bit more.
It feels like that sort of criteria changes every offseason and every cycle of, what the ideal candidate for such and such school is going to look like versus, what it might look like 2 years from now. So I don't know if I have much of a reaction to that.
Okay, fair enough. So, you hinted at the crowd noise, and I didn't walk away from the Iowa game thinking it looked like Indiana had figured much out in that regard. Did you?
I mean, I guess it's hard for me to tell. You obviously had a different perspective watching that game at home on TV, and you picked up the thing we talked about in that post game podcast we did with how Bray Lynch seemed to be giving the snap timing away with something with his arm, and I hadn't even picked up on that in the stadium, so I guess I don't know. And Curt Cignetti did talk a little bit yesterday about just his team's tendencies as far as what the freedom quarterbacks have at the line of scrimmage versus not having that sort of freedom. And it sounds like they generally skew towards just keeping that aspect away from quarterbacks as a whole, which maybe that means I need to be a little easier on all of that with Fernando Mendoza, as far as that's the thing I've been kind of harping on with him, is not recognizing when blitzes are coming, and not doing enough as far as that with the crowd noise. I mean, I don't recall. I mean, it's been a couple weeks. I don't recall Indiana having a lot of like delay of game penalties. I think they may have had like 1 or 2 false start penalties in the game, I don't have the box score in front of me. I'm just going
Yeah,
off memory. I don't. It's not like they had to burn a lot of timeouts because they couldn't hear anything.
right.
It's the offense was, the offense got into a bit of a rut, and
Yeah,
it was just kind of a slow grinder game. But I don't know how much of that was based on, we're playing in a loud, hostile environment at Kinnick Stadium, but versus that's just Iowa football. That's
right.
how Iowa wants to play. So I guess I don't have a great gauge for how the crowd noise aspect of that factors in.
Yeah, I'm probably being too harsh. I mean, it at times against Iowa, it reminded me of the Ohio State game, but the numbers are obviously much better. In Indiana, in the fourth quarter when they needed to put together drives and find answers, they certainly did that. Yeah, that comment Sugdetti made about they haven't audibled since year two at JMU. I found that to be really odd, honestly. Like I feel like there's probably middle school teams and certainly high school teams that just have a play you can check out of with a signal at all times if you don't like the setup. But like, I, do you have any other thoughts on that? Like, I can't really imagine why that would be that you wouldn't just have, okay, if the box is stacked, we check out to something that that works against that. Like, I don't know. That seems weird to me.
It seems very weird to me, frankly. And I mean, I don't know if it's just a lack of trust in that extent in the quarterbacks as a whole. If it's the entire, I mean, because it's more than just the quarterback being able to recognize it and check out of it, but is it that you are not confident enough that 11 kids on the field are going to be able to pick up on that, especially in a road environment? Are 11 kids on the field going to be able to pick up on those signals and know what's going on? A lack of confidence in your kids understanding and mastering of the playbook, and or is it just I guess I don't know exactly where it tells us that something is off, but something is definitely, I don't know, that feels off, especially for, I mean, it'd be one thing if you had like, you were down to your third string quarterback and you were just trying to get by and not get yourself into a really bad situation. And, at that point, if you're saying, all right, we're just going to go with the calls and not audible, I get it. And if you're, if you got a young, unproven quarterback out there, I get that too. But I mean, Fernando Mendoza's experienced and, is being talked about as like a potential future NFL draft pick, first round draft pick, high draft pick, Heisman Trophy candidate. Like that feels like the type of guy that you would be able to trust making decisions like that at the line of scrimmage. But there's obviously so much more that goes into things like that than even the couple of minutes that I just spent talking about it. So it does strike me as strange, but I guess I don't. It's hard for me to go much more than what I said without knowing more behind closed doors what's happening.
Yeah, and well, look, I mean, it's not just an Indiana thing. I feel like there were several games this past weekend that I watched where it was similar scenarios, like third or fourth and short, and you see the way the defense is lined up, and you're thinking like, okay, there's one thing that can't happen on this play. The offense can't have a slow developing running play because it's going to get blown up. And lo and behold, I probably saw it happen like 5 times over the weekend. So it's not just Indiana, but it is hard to imagine that if my untrained eye can see it on television that somehow it can't be picked up and adjusted in real time.
Some of the counterpoint to that, may just be that, instead of going with, maybe the counter to not having that freedom to audible is they, the RPO offenses are much more prevalent in college than they are in the NFL. And, there's where that, maybe the quarterback gets that freedom to read the defense and make the calls in real time is in that RPO once the ball is already snapped. But obviously that still leaves you vulnerable in certain situations.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean technically an RPO is kind of a real-time audible, so I can see that side of it. It kind of sounded like Signetti, it's dangerous to try to read into press conference comments, but it kind of sounded like he was leaving the door open that, changes might be coming in that regard this weekend. That just could be because he was asked about it. And, like I said, who knows what he's really thinking, but I have to believe at some point we'll see adjustments there from Indiana.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Fernando, since we're on that topic. He has played at Autzen Stadium before, which I think is important. Another comment Signetti made yesterday is the second time you do something, you're generally going to be better at it, to paraphrase that comment that he made. His second career start as a college quarterback as a redshirt freshman came at Autzen in 2023. Do you agree that there's some value in kind of having been in that environment before?
Absolutely. I mean, that goes, for football, for life. I mean, your second day at a brand new job is going to be, you know where the bathroom is, you know where your boss sits, just generally, what time the speaker system malfunctions, and whatever. Like, your second, it's just going to be a little bit smoother. Generally what to expect. Fernando has played at Oregon before. Yeah, there's something to that, I think. Do I think that's a game breaker, a difference maker? No. I mean, I don't know that, and Fernando is a different player and with a different team around him than the last time he played at Autzen. But I think there's something to that in terms of his mentality and his comfort level going into an environment like that, because he's seen it before. He knows what to expect.
Yeah, and I went back ahead of the Iowa game and looked, and he had played in other tough environments. I believe it was Auburn, Florida State, maybe another one or two that kind of stood out as, traditionally tough environments anyway. So I think the experience that he's got on the road, plus having just played at Iowa, you kind of go into this game feeling pretty confident that, you never know, but, you don't feel like he's going to be like intimidated would be, I guess, the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he's going to be intimidated by anybody, but the amount of cool that this guy has shown so far this season, and they've played some big games now, and they've gone on the road, and he's stayed cool as a cucumber. So, yeah, I'm not sure that he's really going to be intimidated by anybody or look at this game any differently. I mean, I will point, with the entire offense and how it's going to impact Mendoza, and I think Oregon's run defense is probably the best. It is one of the best in the country, and one of the best that Indiana is going to see all season. Realistically, the pass defense is maybe a little more gettable for Oregon, and what I think the maybe the biggest statistical or PFF grade type advantage that Indiana seems to have in this matchup is Oregon's pass rush does not grade very well on PFF. They're like something in the 60s in the country. I think that 72 point something in pass rush for Oregon, which is a little below where you might expect them to be. And Indiana's, the 15th best pass blocking team in the country. So if they're able to keep Fernando pretty clean for the most part in this game, I mean, that will give Indiana, and from everything we've seen from this offensive line for Indiana so far, I think you can feel pretty good about them at least giving this offense a good chance. I think if they're able to keep Fernando pretty clean, Indiana's going to have plenty of a chance to make this a ball game.
And I went back and looked at Fernando's stats from the trip to Autzen 2 years ago, and he was not protected in that game. Oregon had 20 quarterback pressures in that game, so certainly Indiana can't afford anything that approximates that level of pressure. He was only sacked once, but the amount of hurries and hits that he had impacted his day. He was 18 of 34 passing for 177 yards, no touchdowns and an interception. So, all things considered, I don't know how much you put into that for a redshirt freshman in a second career start in an environment like that, but
with a different school.
yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say about Indiana though, like the protection against Iowa wasn't great. The running backs struggled in protection. Khalil Benson struggled. I I don't know if Oregon's the team to pull it off, but I felt like Iowa was trying to replicate that. You know, stunts and heavy pressure at the line and timing the snap count like Ohio State. So I think if a team has the personnel to pull it off, they can potentially give Indiana some trouble up front.
Yeah, I mean, you dug in more to the, single game PFF grades from the Iowa game than I did. And so, I guess I don't know how the numbers backed it up, but at least just from the eye test, I felt like it wasn't completely perfect all game. And there were
Right.
moments where Indiana was kind of, going up against the tide. It felt like, in terms of the defensive front for Iowa. But I mean, I thought there were at least pretty long stretches in the game where, Fernando had a decently clean pocket, or, Indiana's running game was able to get some stuff going in there. A lot of that I will admit was, second effort type of plays. Like you saw Roman Hemby really, pick up a lot of yards after contact. Kalen Black did that too. So, maybe that speaks to some of that as well, just the amount of yards after contact that it felt like Indiana's running backs were getting. Pass blocking wise, Fernando, I think his mobility is able to mask some of that, some pass block issues at times. I think because he's able to, sometimes he may get out of there a little too quickly, but
Right.
he's able to get out of the pocket, extend some plays. Whether he's just going to take off and run himself, or if he's just going to be able to hit an open receiver or just make something happen with his legs. I mean, that'll always help mask it a little bit, but I didn't think the blocking was bad against Iowa. I guess I'd just, I'd put it somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just noticed on the per game PFF stats, the right side of the offensive line specifically was Benson and Bray Lynch that seemed like they struggled a little bit more, and the running back. So again, I mean, I was a good defense, like you said. That's what they do. It's I don't want to put too much into it, but it's something to monitor for sure. Anything else on this matchup? I mean, we talked about Pons being back. The bye week. Having time to prepare, second straight road trip in a tough environment. I think there's a lot of things that stack up well for Indiana. It's just the fact that you're playing the number 2 team in the country. That's the real challenge here.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll bring up a point that I made in this game about this game preseason, and I mean, it's not something that I still have completely put to bed yet, and I'm going to look at the coaching matchup here. I mean, we talked a little bit about Dan Lanning and his rise, but let's look at Curt Cignetti too and how he approaches a game like this, because we've seen it a few times where Cignetti in big games kind of turtles up a little bit and plays a little conservative and plays not to lose instead of playing to win and taking his foot off the gas a little bit. And I mean, obviously, they got the job done at Iowa, playing really the way Iowa wants you to play. But it's easy to forget. I mean, that Illinois game, I think it was still 7-7, and there was the 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 or whatever near midfield where Cignetti went back and forth between whether he was going to go for it or whether he was going to punt. And when they had the punt team out there at first for a second, I'm like, here we go again. And, he ended up calling timeout, putting the offense back out there, going for it. The rest, that helped open the floodgates. But I mean, that's what Indiana is going to have to do in a matchup like this, because for any little edges you might see, here or there, whatever little things might tip the scales. If Cignetti is playing this conservatively and playing not to lose and not being aggressive like we've known him to be so many times, it's going to put Indiana behind the 8 ball at some point.
I do agree with you, and I definitely have heard that from a lot of fans that they feel like that's what's going on. I mean, one counterpoint I would make is that people are perceiving this against really good teams on the road, which have a way of making you look like you're not as effective as you are. Like they may be calling plays and making decisions that they think are going to work more effectively than they do and have worked against lesser opponents. So I wouldn't completely count that aspect of it out.
Yeah, I mean, I have less issue than I've heard all the plenty of people complaining about, the run pass balance, in short
Hmm.
yardage situations. Which, I mean, I went back through the Iowa tape and pulled up all the third and I think any play from 2 yards or less, and it actually was pretty balanced between run and pass. So those comments I think are don't hold much water. I don't really have as much issue with, you know, maybe the offense. I mean, I think there were some moments where you could question Mike Shanahan's play calling. It's less about that for me than it is, just certain decisions about, like that thing in the Illinois game, kicking it or punting it or going for it on fourth down, or kicking a field goal versus going for it on fourth down, or just levels of trust in your special teams units, down there. And I mean, it's even less about the Ohio State game than it was. It felt like, in that playoff game against Notre Dame, it felt like there
Hmm.
were a few times where they punted it on, like, on fourth and shorts, 4th and 2, 4th and 3, where it felt like those were the types of plays they would have gone for it for most of the season last year. And, has there haven't been that many opportunities for it, for him to show that this year. But I mean, the fact that he waffled back and forth so much on that one play against Illinois shows me, I mean, that's still in his head in some aspects of, how am I going to play this? And, whether that's just level of indecision or whether that's just kind of shaking old habits or whatever it is. I mean, it's something to watch for in this game. And Indiana has, when you go up against a big team like this, you need to be able to keep your foot on the gas. And it's not that Indiana's had an issue of playing a full 60 minutes or putting teams away, but is Signetti going to make decisions in this game, whether it's timeout usage, whether it's, kick or punt decisions, whether it's going for it or not going for it? Like, are there going to be coaching decisions like that in this game that make up part of the difference in this game? I think that's a underratedly important thing to watch in this matchup.
No, I think that's a really good point. And your Notre Dame comment segued into something I wanted to mention because Signetti has said that in hindsight, he wishes that they had gone to more of a tempo style offense in that game earlier because they had some success with it late. And it's something about their approach that I've kind of been a little bit surprised about. They rarely, in my opinion, go to true like tempo offense, and I feel like it's a way that you can counter crowd noise. It's a way that you can counter opponents timing the snaps and just put a defense on their heels. And they haven't used that too much, and it seems like this would be a good opportunity to try to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you can obviously get the defense tired, and if you're going to some tempo, obviously you're most likely not subbing out, which means the defense won't be able to sub out either. So, there's a lot of different elements to that.
And I guess the a downside element is that you risk a quick three and out, putting your defense right back on the field, which if you're coaching conservatively, you might not want to do. So we'll see how that part of it goes. I mean, big picture, I don't think a loss in this game, if Indiana were to lose, knocks them out of anything. Although especially not the CFP, I think there's a decent chance it could knock them out of the Big Ten title game because you look at Oregon's schedule, it's hard to see them losing another game, and obviously Indiana would lose the tiebreaker. It's hard to see Ohio State losing, but you never know with Michigan. So it seems like it's more of a factor for the Big Ten than the CFP. But what I think it does do, if Indiana were to lose, and sorry to have the doomsday scenario here, but if they were to lose, I think it would kind of put them where they can't afford a second loss, and they still have that Penn State game out there as well. So it would kind of put the pressure on.
Yeah, and I mean, the way things have played out this season, I mean, there's a chance that, at 10-2, maybe you're still in that discussion, maybe.
Yeah.
But you're right that I mean, losing this game, it does just kind of it's definitely not an eliminator, as far as the college football playoff. I mean, look, open a sports book right now at FanDuel, and Indiana's minus 188 to make the playoffs. So they're favored to make the college football playoff at this point. And that's, they know that Indiana has these games still to come against Oregon and
Right.
Penn State. Losing to Oregon, there's no shame in losing to Oregon. Oregon's a great team, and you're on the road. There's no shame in losing to Oregon. And
Right.
obviously, you got to see how the game plays out and how, a loss it would look in terms of the final score and how everything went and all of that. But yeah, it would just kind of impact their margin for error. And the Big Ten title game kind of is what it is. If they end up missing the Big Ten title game, I don't know that, if they're 11, if they're sitting at 11-1 and they miss the Big Ten title game, I don't know that Kurt Signetti is going to shed a tear. I mean,
right.
Obviously, that's not to poo-poo the Big Ten title game and what that would signify for an Indiana football program that wouldn't have dreamed of playing in Indianapolis a few years ago. But I mean, if they're comfortably, I think the college football playoff is going to be the top priority for everybody in that building.
Yeah, I certainly think it should be. Like, I remember thinking last year when Oregon and Penn State were playing in that title game, it's not the worst thing in the world that Indiana's not in this. Just an extra week of rest before the CFP, and you saw what happened to Georgia last year in their conference championship game. So I continue to be of the view that those games are a little bit pointless, but nobody's listening to me.
And you saw what happened to Florida State with their title with the CFP a couple of years ago.
Yes, my argument is expand the CFP, get rid of the conference title games, but it's also kind of hard to determine a conference champion when you got like 18 team leagues, like, in such a imbalance in scheduling. So that argues back for the title game, but I don't know. It's certainly not perfect, but I think we should wrap it up here with predictions for this game. I'll go first. I predicted. We all predicted before the season that Indiana would lose this game. We all had them starting 5-0 as they did, and all had them losing this game. I still am going to go with Oregon in this game. I think it's going to be close. I'm going to say something like 27-24. Oregon wins it, but it's just kind of how I see it. Like, I just think Indiana will be competitive, but it's just going to be one of those tough games on the road.
Yeah, I think I would still lean towards Oregon winning this one as well. I mean, the point spread has moved towards Indiana, if you want to talk about that aspect of it, because, I mean, I think it opened at plus 10.5 or plus 9.5 this week to Indiana, and it's now down to plus 7.5. So, I mean, Vegas seems and gamblers seem to think that this is going to be, a pretty close game. And I can see Indiana still covering that mark, but, I mean, I tend to think that Oregon at home is just, if this game was in Bloomington, it might be another story based on what we've seen. But I think at Oregon, I think I'm still going to stick with the Ducks. So, I mean, if you're talking a score, I don't know, maybe like 33-29, something like that.
Okay. I won't make you explain how you get there, but
you know what? Sometimes football scores are weird.
Absolutely.
You go for two some weird time, and then you got to scoregami.
All right. Well, on that Debbie Downer moment, we'll leave it right there, and we'll talk to you all. I don't know if it'll be Saturday after the game. I've got my family going out there with me, so I don't know exactly how the timing of all that's going to work out. But either Saturday or at some point, we will get back to you all and revisit this game and the outlook for the remainder of the season. But until then, he is Seth Tao. I am Mike Schumann for the Daily Hoosier and the East 17th Street podcast. We will catch you all next time.